The interview was supposed to last 15 minutes, a simple promotional segment with Hollywood's latest heartthrob discussing his new romantic comedy. But when actor James Mitchell started talking about his 8th grade English teacher, something in his voice changed. The rehearsed charm disappeared, replaced by something raw and genuine that made Ellen lean forward in her chair. What happened next would transform a standard celebrity interview into one of the most powerful moments in daytime television history. "She changed my life," James was saying, his voice thick with emotion that surprised both him and Ellen. "Mrs. Sarah Chen, room 204 at Roosevelt Middle School in Portland. If it wasn't for her, I never would have discovered acting, never would have believed I was capable of anything special." Ellen studied James's face. She had interviewed thousands of celebrities over the years, and she could tell when someone was performing versus when they were speaking from the heart. This was the latter. "Tell me about her," Ellen said, abandoning her prepared questions. James smiled, and for a moment he looked less like a movie star and more like the awkward 13-year-old he once was. "I was the kid who sat in the back, never spoke up, barely turned in assignments. I thought I was invisible. But Mrs. Chen, she saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. She cast me as Romeo in our class production of Romeo and Juliet, and when I told her I couldn't do it, that I wasn't good enough, she said something I'll never forget." "What did she say?" "She said, 'James, you don't become an actor because you're already confident. You become confident because you're an actor.' And then she made me promise that if I ever made it, I'd come back and tell her class about following their dreams." Ellen felt something shift in the studio. The audience was leaning in, hanging on every word. This wasn't celebrity gossip or promotional material anymore. This was a love letter to a teacher who had changed a life. "Have you kept that promise?" Ellen asked. James's expression fell slightly. "I tried to. I went back to the school last month, but they told me Mrs. Chen doesn't teach there anymore. They wouldn't give me her contact information due to privacy policies. I've been trying to find her for weeks, but..." He shrugged helplessly. What happened next was pure Ellen magic, the kind of spontaneous decision that had made her show legendary for creating moments that mattered more than entertainment. "Well," Ellen said, that familiar mischievous sparkle appearing in her eyes, "it's a good thing you mentioned her on national television, because I have a feeling Mrs. Chen might be watching." She turned to address the camera directly. "Sarah Chen, if you're out there, we'd love to have you here. James has something he wants to tell you." The audience applauded, and James looked at Ellen with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. But neither of them could have predicted what would happen over the next 24 hours. Ellen's team worked through the night. Social media exploded with people trying to locate Sarah Chen. The hashtag #FindMrsChen trended worldwide. Local news stations picked up the story, and by morning, they had found her. Sarah Chen, now 52, was teaching 8th grade English at Lincoln Middle School in suburban Portland. She lived in a small apartment with her elderly mother and spent her evenings grading papers and planning lessons with the same passion she'd brought to the classroom for over 2 decades. She was beloved by her students, respected by her colleagues, and facing a battle that nobody at her school knew about. When Ellen's producer called her, Sarah's first reaction was disbelief. James Mitchell? The James Mitchell? That quiet boy from my Romeo and Juliet unit? But when they explained what James had said about her, Sarah cried. Not tears of joy, though there were those too, but tears of someone who had been carrying a heavy secret and suddenly felt the weight of being truly seen. "I'd love to come on the show," Sarah told the producer, "but I should probably tell you something first." The taping was scheduled for the next day. Ellen had planned it as a surprise reunion. James would think he was coming back for a follow-up interview, and Sarah would walk out as a surprise guest. It would be heartwarming television, a feel-good moment to end the week. But when Sarah arrived at the studio that morning, everything changed. Ellen met with Sarah privately before the show, as she often did with guests who seemed nervous. Sarah sat in the green room, actually blue, but they still called it the green room, wearing a simple black dress and the kind of cardigan that teachers everywhere seemed to favor. She looked exactly like what she was, a dedicated educator who had spent her life nurturing young minds. "I have to tell you something," Sarah said before Ellen could even introduce herself properly. "Something that my students don't know, something that James doesn't know, something that might change how you want to handle today." Ellen sat down across from Sarah, immediately sensing the gravity in her voice. "What is it?" Sarah took a deep breath, the kind of breath people take before they say words that will change everything. "I have pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors say I have maybe 3 months left, possibly 6 if I'm lucky." The words hung in the air between them. Ellen had heard difficult stories before, had dealt with guests facing unimaginable challenges, but something about the quiet dignity with which Sarah delivered this news hit her differently. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. How long have you known?" 2 months. I finished the cancer treatments last month, but they weren't effective. I made the decision to stop aggressive treatment and focus on finishing out the school year with my kids." "Do they know?" "Your students?" Sarah shook her head. "I can't tell them. They're 13 and 14 years old. They have enough to worry about without watching their teacher die. I want them to remember me as their English teacher, not their sick teacher. I want them to remember the lessons and the laughter, not hospital visits and sadness." Ellen felt her heart break in the particular way it did when she encountered someone whose strength in the face of adversity was almost incomprehensible. "What do you want to do? We can cancel, we can postpone, we can handle this however you need." "No," Sarah said firmly. "I want to do this. James kept his promise and I want to keep mine. I want to tell him how proud I am. I want to show my current students that dreams really do come true. I need you to know the truth." Ellen made a decision that would transform what was planned as a light-hearted reunion into something much more profound. She called her producers, her writers, her entire team. They scrapped the planned segment and created something entirely new. When the cameras rolled an hour later, James was sitting in his guest chair, expecting a quick follow-up conversation. Ellen had a different plan. "James, yesterday you told us about a teacher who changed your life. You wanted to find her, to thank her. Well, we found her." James's face lit up with anticipation. "But before I bring her out, she wanted me to tell you something. She said that in 23 years of teaching, she's had thousands of students. But you, James Mitchell, you were special. Not because you became famous, but because you understood that believing in yourself was a choice. She said she's watched every movie you've ever made, and she's proud of the man you've become." James was already emotional, but Ellen wasn't finished. "She also wanted me to tell you that she's still teaching, still changing lives, still casting quiet kids as Romeo and telling them they're capable of extraordinary things." Ellen paused, making a decision that would define this moment. "James, Mrs. Chen is here today, but I need to tell you something first. She's facing a challenge right now, and she wanted you to know because she believes in honesty above all else." Something in Ellen's tone made James's smile falter slightly. "What kind of challenge?" "She's very sick, James. She has cancer and she doesn't have much time left. But she's here because she wanted to see you, to tell you how proud she is, and to meet the man who still remembers her classroom." The studio fell completely silent. James's face went through a series of emotions: shock, sadness, and then something deeper: understanding. "Can I see her?" he whispered. Ellen nodded, and Sarah Chen walked onto the stage. The reunion was everything television dreams are made of and more. James stood up immediately, and they embraced like the teacher and student they had always been, despite the years and the fame and the distance. Sarah looked exactly like she had in James's memories, just older, grayer, but with the same kind eyes and gentle smile. "You kept your promise," Sarah said, pulling back to look at him. "I tried to find you sooner," James replied, his voice breaking. "You found me exactly when you were supposed to." They sat down together, and Ellen let them talk. About the class, about the play, about the moment when James had discovered he could be someone other than the invisible kid in the back row. The audience was riveted, but this conversation transcended entertainment. This was about legacy, about the ripple effects of believing in someone. But then Sarah turned to Ellen with a request that would create the most powerful moment of the entire show. "Ellen, can I ask you for a favor?" "Anything." "My current students don't know I'm here today. They don't know about my diagnosis, but they know about James. I've told them the story of the quiet boy who became a movie star. I wonder, is there any way they could see this? Could I teach them one more lesson about following their dreams? Ellen looked at Sarah, then at James, then at her production team. What she was thinking was technically impossible, or at least unprecedented. But Ellen had built her career on making the impossible happen. Sarah, what if I told you we could do better than that? What if we could bring your classroom here? Within an hour, Ellen's team had worked a miracle. They set up a live video connection with Lincoln Middle School, where Sarah's 28 eighth grade students had been gathered in the school auditorium, told only that their teacher had a surprise for them. When Sarah appeared on their screen, sitting next to James Mitchell on the Ellen DeGeneres show, the reaction was explosive. 28 teenagers screaming with excitement, disbelief, and pride for their teacher who was suddenly on national television with a real movie star. "Hi, my amazing class," Sarah said, her voice strong and clear despite the tears in her eyes. "I want you to meet someone. This is James, and he was once a student just like you. He sat in a classroom just like ours, and he felt invisible, just like some of you do sometimes." James took the microphone. "Your teacher changed my life," he told them. "She taught me that being different wasn't a weakness, it was a superpower. She taught me that believing in yourself isn't about being confident all the time. It's about choosing to try even when you're scared." But Sarah wasn't finished. She had one more lesson to teach. "I want you to remember this moment," she told her students, her voice carrying across the distance between Hollywood and Portland. "Not because your teacher is on TV, but because this is what happens when you plant seeds of belief. James planted those seeds in himself 15 years ago, and look how they grew. Each of you has seeds inside you too. Different seeds, different dreams, but the same potential for growth." One of her students raised her hand, even through the video connection maintaining the classroom protocol that Sarah had taught them. "Mrs. Chen, are you coming back to school on Monday?" Sarah paused, and Ellen saw her struggle with the weight of truth and protection, the impossible balance of honesty and care that teachers navigate every day. "I'm going to try," Sarah said finally. "But even if I can't, I want you to remember that the most important lessons aren't about English or literature. They're about believing in yourselves and in each other. Will you promise me that?" 28 voices called out, "Yes, Mrs. Chen," in unison, and Ellen felt her own tears fall freely. After the connection ended, Sarah turned to Ellen with one final request. "Ellen, I know this is presumptuous, but would it be possible? Could someone continue reading with them? They're in the middle of To Kill a Mockingbird, and I don't want them to stop learning because I can't be there." Ellen looked at James, who nodded immediately. "I'd be honored," he said. But Ellen had a bigger idea. "Sarah, what if we did something else? What if we created a program where actors could visit classrooms and read with students? We could call it the Sarah Chen Reading Initiative." Sarah stared at Ellen, speechless. "And what if we made sure that every student in your class gets a full scholarship to college? Because the teacher who believed in James Mitchell deserves to know that her students will have every opportunity to follow their dreams." The audience erupted, but Sarah just sat there, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. "You don't have to do that," she whispered. "We want to," Ellen replied, "because teachers like you are the reason kids like James, and kids like your current students, believe that anything is possible." But Ellen had one more surprise that would demonstrate just how far Sarah's influence had reached. During the commercial break, she made a series of phone calls that would bring Sarah's impact full circle in the most unexpected way. "Sarah, I need to ask you something," Ellen said when they returned from break. "In your 23 years of teaching, have you ever wondered about your other students? The ones who didn't become movie stars, but whose lives you touched in ways you might never know?" Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "Every teacher wonders about that. You hope you made a difference, but you rarely get to see the long-term effects." "Well, today you're going to see those effects," Ellen announced, because James wasn't the only one watching yesterday's show. The studio doors opened, and a parade of people began walking onto the stage. Adults in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, all carrying something in their hands. Sarah's mouth fell open as she recognized face after face, former students from different years, different classes, different decades of her teaching career. There was Michael, who had become a pediatric nurse and credited Sarah with teaching him empathy through literature. Lisa, now a social worker, who said Sarah's lessons about standing up for others had shaped her career choice. David, a high school principal who still used Sarah's classroom management techniques. Maria, a published poet who had written her first poem in Sarah's class and never stopped writing. One by one, they approached Sarah with items they had kept from her class, graded papers with encouraging comments, copies of books she had recommended, photos from class productions, letters she had written to parents praising their children's potential. "Mrs. Chen," said Amanda, now a successful lawyer, "you probably don't remember this, but in 9th grade, you told me I had a powerful voice and should use it to help people. I became a lawyer because of that conversation." "I remember every single one of you," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face as she hugged each former student. The most powerful moment came when Marcus, now in his mid-30s, stepped forward carrying a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. "Mrs. Chen, this is the book you gave me when I was 14 and angry at the world. I was heading down a bad path, but you saw something in me that I couldn't see. You wrote something in the front cover that changed my life." He opened the book and read aloud. "Marcus, Atticus Finch said you can't really understand a person until you walk in their shoes. I believe you have the capacity for great empathy and wisdom. Use it to make the world better. Ms. Chen." Marcus looked up at Sarah, his voice steady but emotional. "I kept this book through college, through law school, through 15 years as a public defender. Every time I doubted myself, I read your note. You saved my life, Mrs. Chen. You saved a lot of lives." James, who had been watching this reunion with amazement, stood up and addressed the former students who had gathered around their teacher. "I thought I was special because Mrs. Chen changed my life," he said. "But seeing all of you here, I realized something. Mrs. Chen didn't just change my life. She changed dozens of lives, maybe hundreds. She's been planting seeds for over 2 decades, and look at this incredible garden that's grown." Sarah was overwhelmed, surrounded by the living proof of her life's work. Ellen watched with tears in her eyes as teacher and students created a circle of connection that transcended time and distance. "This is what I want you to see, Sarah," Ellen said softly. "This is your legacy. Not just James the movie star, but Michael the nurse who saves children, Lisa the social worker who protects families, David the principal who shapes young minds, Marcus the defender who fights for justice. You didn't just teach English, you taught humanity." 3 weeks later, Sarah Chen passed away peacefully in her sleep on a Sunday morning. Her students learned about her illness that Monday when the principal gathered them together to share the news. But instead of just grief, they felt something else. Gratitude for having been chosen by someone so extraordinary. James Mitchell attended the funeral, along with Ellen and 12 other celebrities who had been inspired by Sarah's story. But the most moving tribute came from her students, who read passages from To Kill a Mockingbird and talked about the lessons she had taught them about courage, empathy, and believing in themselves. The Sarah Chen Reading Initiative became one of Ellen's most successful charitable programs, sending actors and celebrities into classrooms across the country to read with students and share their stories of overcoming obstacles. James became the program's first ambassador, visiting schools every month and always beginning with the same words: "I want to tell you about a teacher who changed my life." And in room 204 at Lincoln Middle School, there's now a plaque that reads, "In memory of Sarah Chen, who taught us that believing in someone is the greatest gift you can give." Below it, her final lesson to her students is inscribed, "Plant seeds of belief. You never know how magnificent they'll grow." Because sometimes the most important interviews aren't about promoting movies or selling products. Sometimes they're about honoring the people who plant seeds in our lives, who see potential when we can't see it ourselves, who remind us that every student sitting in the back row might be capable of extraordinary things. Sarah Chen taught James Mitchell how to believe in himself. But in the end, she taught all of us something even more valuable, that the greatest legacy isn't what we achieve, but what we inspire others to achieve. and that the most powerful moments happen when we choose to see the hero in every quiet kid, in every classroom, in every heart that's brave enough to dream.